All right. So far you all have learned about state in React, right? And you've learned how to set up a React project. Now let's talk about props. Props are essentially short for properties, and they are used to pass data between components because data in React really exists as state and props. Like you could think of them as essentially being the same thing, but with one key difference. Props are immutable, whereas state is mutable. You can change state, but you cannot change props. You can think of props then as a sort of snapshot of state. Does that make sense? Does that not make sense to anyone? Cool. So this is why we have setters and getters in state, right? You don't directly manipulate the value of a state. Instead, you use the set state to update that value. So when you're passing props down to child components, you could think of it as being a read-only copy of the original data, right? And the thing is, with functions though, when you're passing down a function, that can be executed, that can be called. So you can pass down setters and getters and use that to manipulate state. It'll make more sense once we're seeing it live. One last thing to say about props before we move on is that there are multiple ways to pass them down. You can pass them down in a standard way where you're just kind of like passing down props as, let's say, like a dictionary or a container. Or you could also pass down props individually, and that's called destructuring. So let's take a look at this right now. We have a functional component that is creating another React component called profile, right? And it's passing down this name property. When we go to that child component, we are going to import it as name in this example here. But if we don't want to, that's called destructuring. But if we don't want to destructure, we could just pass props down as an entire object. And then you have access to all of the properties that were passed down. You just have to label it correctly. So props.name, props.image URL. We are able to individually call either of these properties as a child of the props object. Or child's not the best word, but let's say a nested object within an object, right? When you destructure, you're passing down that object directly in the parentheses, the portion where you're passing down parameters, right? And you do so in curly brackets. The only difference is when you call these properties now, you could call them directly. You no longer have to say props.name or image props.image URL. In terms of behavior, it's essentially the exact same behavior. You're just passing down the property in one of two ways. So keep that in mind when you are troubleshooting props, or if they're not available or if you're not able to read them, it might be because of how you're passing it down. One other thing we're going to look at today is using ternaries to apply some conditional rendering to our components. I don't know if you all did this yesterday, but it's super handy. It's super awesome. This allows you to basically, create conditions that will affect whether or not a component behaves the way that it does. And it's simple syntax because it's a ternary. It's a single line of code. Yes, basically they will replace an if-else statement for conditional rendering. So let's switch over to VS Code. Are there any questions on any of this? Cool. Let's create a new project. Follow along if you can. And somebody tell me how we are going to create a new React project.
And
Oh,
go ahead,
sorry.
Michael.
Gonna do npm space create space vite vite @ latest.
All right, let's do it. And I'm going to name my project now that I've called Vite. And I'm going to name it, is it Vite or Vite? It's French for fast, right? I don't know how to pronounce it. I don't speak French.
Oh, I don't vite sound I don't know.
But yes, I'm going to name this something like props demo 2. And as you've all seen the other day, when you're installing through Vite or Vite, you get all these cool little options. We are going to select React. Um, are you all using TypeScript? Okay. Has either Chad or Jordan said not to use TypeScript?
I mean, we've never used it, so
Okay. I don't know, Phil's not here. If he were, he would talk about how much he loves TypeScript. TypeScript's great. It's basically just JavaScript, but more verbose. It has additional type, I guess like you could call it like requirements, error handling, error checking. It's
It has a lot more rules to it,
yeah, there you go.
but it's
So
pretty. I mean, it's pretty versatile though. Honestly, like if you know JavaScript, you could damn well do TypeScript.
yeah, definitely. I'm gonna select it just because I like to. You can if you're curious. You're probably gonna see more squiggly lines and errors than you normally would with JavaScript, but hey, that's how you learn, right? So once you've selected a variant for your framework, like I just have, I'm gonna cd into that directory, and then I'm going to run my npm install. I am recording, right? Am I recording? Oh
You
yeah.
are corny.
Okay, cool. Um, yeah, YouTube videos are public, so I'm not going to be sharing Rich and Catherine's presentation. I'm going to give you all a direct link to it in Google Drive later. Let's see. So for this, I just ran npm install, and now I'm going to run npm dev or npm run dev to see what it looks like. And if I pull this down, we could see our default vanilla React project. Let's minimize that a bit. Switch over to VS Code. And let's start deleting some stuff that we don't need. All of this boilerplate code is expendable. Let's get rid of all this too. And I am going to cd out of this directory, cd into my new one. And have you all talked about the basic folder structure of a React app?
Yeah,
Go
some
ahead.
like creating like a components file and stuff. Is that
Mhm.
what
Yeah, a bit. All of that stuff, like you have a lot of freedom to design your React app as you see fit. Like there are different approaches. Like if you want to take a model view, controller view, you'll probably be writing in a structure where you have components as a folder, things of that nature. One thing I do want to say is everything is pretty much going to exist within the source directory. Everything outside of here, you really should not need to touch. Package.json might be something that you'll touch from time to time. Configurations for frameworks like Tailwind CSS may require you to mess with your package.json or edit a config outside of source. But all the actual React logic you're writing will be inside source. So am I in the right directory? Nope. I'm going to go down to props demo 2. I'm going to go to source, and I'm going to go into my app.tsx, and I'm going to get rid of all this extra stuff that I don't want. I don't want any of that. I don't want this, and I don't want that. You have to be careful about deleting closing tags to the opening tags that you're keeping. Now we have a fresh, clean example of this app with just count as our state, one of our states. Let's see. So basically, if you click on this, it's going to increment by 1. The way that works is the button is set to call a set count on click. And I'm sure, as you saw yesterday, we aren't doing this directly. We're doing this through an anonymous function. If we were to do this, not as an anonymous function, but as something like this, let's get rid of that. Let's say we were doing something like this, right? First off, it's breaking. I was thinking it would break for another reason, but let's see. Okay, so it's complaining about void not assignable to type. That's the first thing that it doesn't like. It doesn't like that it's not being called correctly. So this doesn't work. You have to use this syntax to anonymously call this behavior. This is a setter that is essentially setting the value of count to its current value plus 1. This is syntax for a lambda expression. So within this anonymous function, we have another anonymous function, really, and that's how that behavior is working. Any questions on that? Cool. So that's for incrementing, but really today's lesson is supposed to be about props. So let's start talking about props and passing down parameters or values or data from a parent to a child. So I'm going to create a new directory. I'm going to call it components. And I'm going to make a new React component called reset states. I'm going to call do .tsx because we're in TypeScript and not JavaScript. And I'm going to do my, let's see, from React, import React. Something like that, right? No. Yeah, let's do it like that. And then we're going to, do I have this extension installed still? React functional. Oh, cool. Yeah, I do. There's this really cool extension that allows you to just create boilerplate React code super quick. So I'm going to create a React functional component with just the letters RFC. And we see the boilerplate code for a React functional component. We did not talk about functional versus class components. This is going to be quick, but does anyone know the difference between a functional and a class component?
One is a component that's a function and one's a class.
Exactly, exactly. Do we care about class components?
Not right now.
I would say that's right. And I would say in general, you're not going to. If you've been reading how the React developers are updating the React app, their documentation as it expands and evolves just further and further emphasizes functional components over class components. Class components are way more verbose. There's a lot of like headaches that you'll be dealing with trying to instantiate state and things like that with a class component. They're dated. The only reasons you'll be interacting with a class component in React is if that code already exists and it's just legacy code that you have to work with, right? But when you're creating new code, new applications, when you're writing something new, there shouldn't be any real reason to write in a class component over a functional component. Functional components at this point, the way they've evolved and been built out, can do everything that a class component can do, but easier. If we were to look at React our documentation, I'm pretty sure they say this somewhere. Yeah, the class component stuff is often under the legacy portion. It's just dated. You're going to want to use functional components over class components, like maybe 95% of the time, if not 99. That said, that thing I just showed you using RFC, it's an extension that allows me to just basically install boilerplate code, and RFC is React Functional Component. Okay, with that, let's rename this. No, we want to keep this reset state. That's what we want. Here in reset state, what do we want to be able to do? Well, we want to be able to reset the value of our count, right? So in order to do this, we're going to need a button. So let's create a button. And it's going to behave through a click interaction. So let's do an on click. And let's just name the button something like reset count. Okay. Now that this is being exported, it's probably going to complain about this because there's nothing in there, but we'll ignore it for now. We can, one, import it so that we could access, so that we can use it, basically. It's called reset state. Did I mean to call it reset state? I mean to call it reset count, actually. Not that it's a big deal, but reset count. Should have updated here, should have updated here. Nope. Okay, we've renamed it, and now we could plop it into our return statement. A little bit about this return statement, if Jordan nor Umar haven't talked about it yet. This is, can somebody tell me what kind of syntax this is? Everything in the return statement.
HTML.
No. It's close though.
So there's the JSX.
Exactly. JSX is like a hybridization of HTML and JavaScript. It allows us to utilize HTML, but with the additional functionality of React components and React components syntax. So everything that you're seeing inside of these like traditional caret wrappers, that's, yes, HTML. But you also have access to React components, which you call through a very specific syntax, right? For React count, or sorry, reset count, which is a component. Yes, we're still using this less than, greater than, left caret, right caret kind of syntax, but we could also do some really neat things like wrap it inside some curly brackets. And then we could say something like count is greater than 0, question mark. I don't want to do a question mark yet. I'm just going to do a double ampersand. So only if the count is greater than 0 should this reset count render. And it's complaining now, so let's ignore it for just a few more minutes, and let's talk about passing down props. Now that we've called reset count, we could pass down a property, right? So because this return statement is inside of the app function, we have access to apps states. Remember, state exists only within the component it's written in. If you want to transfer data outside of that component, you've got to pass it as a prop. So I want to pass down the set count method. Actually, no. Or yeah, let's do that. Let's do that. I'm gonna, yeah, pass down set count. The syntax for this is basically a name of the prop and the I guess the value that you want to pass down, in this case, set count. And now we go over to reset count. We're going to do it this way first, just importing props. And then we should be able to say props dot reset count. Or no, I was doing set count, right? Yeah, I was doing set count. Okay, cool. So the squiggly line disappeared because it's being passed down now. And as we could see, this button isn't showing up. But if I click on count, oh, I was hoping that it would show up. So let's see if there's anything wrong with my logic so far. I wonder if it's because I'm not calling this. I don't think so, though. Okay, I guess it was. It didn't like that I was just plopping in this setter inside of the onClick. Earlier, it was showing us that error saying something about void, returning void. It just doesn't like that, right? So we use an anonymous function to get past that error message. Now that it's rendering, we see that if we reset to 0, well, now it's not even working. So let's see, why is it not working? Oh, because, yeah, of course, we have to finish writing the function or the setter. We have to actually set a value that we're going to set it to. So we're going to set this back to 0. If I click on reset, we've reset the count back to 0. And again, if I increase the count, the button shows back up because we have this JSX syntax here. We're saying if count is greater than 0 and this element exists, render this element. Okay, so now if we hit reset, it disappears again. This is passing props as a, well, just as props. This is like the standard way of doing it. But we could also do it another way, right? We can create a new component here, call it reset count, I don't know, destructure.tsx. Let's use our handy little extension to quickly create some boilerplate. And let's actually just copy paste this because we want the exact same functionality. But instead of saying props.setCount, I'm going to destructure the props that I'm passing down to just say set count. And now if I go back here and I update my import to include this new component, which I think is called reset count destructured, from reset count destructured, let's now look at calling reset count destructured. So when we now click on count, we see both of these buttons and we see that they have the exact same functionality, right? They are both resetting the count to 0. But how I'm calling it is the only difference. Here I'm saying set count, and I could do that because I've destructured my props. And here in the original component, I'm passing props as an entire container of properties. Any questions? Cool. Like I said, quick and painless. That's pretty much all we're covering today. And our challenge is state abbreviator and panel app. So let's work on those. I'm going to open up breakout rooms. Let's reconvene at 9 o'clock and have some folks share their solutions. And we've all been sitting here for about an hour. So while I open up breakout rooms, go ahead and take a 15-minute break.